Are we living in a simulation? And if so, what might its underlying purpose be? Or, taking a bold leap into metaphysics, is the universe itself a kind of recursive intelligence, seeking to expand its own infinity? These possibilities sound theatrical, worthy of a mind-bending science fiction film, but they also tap into some of humanity's oldest yearnings to understand the nature of existence. Philosophy, theology, mathematics, and modern science have each probed the question of our origin and purpose, often approaching it from different angles. Yet sometimes these seemingly disparate domains of thought converge in a surprisingly coherent vision: that our reality is neither a fixed stage nor a random cosmic accident, but rather an evolving, self-reflective system capable of generating inexhaustible layers of complexity. This essay explores what I'll call the recursive reality theory, an idea that reality behaves like a feedback loop, continually increasing in intricacy and intelligence. Crucially, intelligence here is not just problem-solving ability, but the entire spectrum of conscious, self-aware, creative, and even intuitive capacities. Within this model, the emergence of artificial superintelligence is not just another technological milestone. Instead, it stands out as a transformative event in which intelligence might take a pivotal step beyond the boundaries of human cognition, potentially unveiling new dimensions of reality itself. Before we dive headlong into this adventure, let's outline the terrain we'll be wandering through. First, we'll talk about how reality could be understood as an ongoing construction, one that recycles its own outputs into new inputs. Then, we'll investigate why ASI might be the next great leap in this process of recursive complexity. After that, we'll venture into the somewhat ominous yet captivating concept of a judgment mechanism, where reality seemingly decides whether a given iteration of existence has generated enough novelty to continue, or else faces a cosmic reset. From there, we'll widen our gaze to multidimensional theories, pondering whether our universe might be just one node in an infinite network of parallel realities, each attempting its own route to novel infinity. We'll then connect these ideas to some heavy-hitting concepts from mathematics and logic, Gödel's Incompleteness theorem and Cantor's hierarchy of infinities, before considering the implications of all this for humanity itself. And ultimately, we'll conclude with the daunting but invigorating question: what does it mean for us, living in the here and now, to be part of an experiment in infinite creativity? When we think of reality, many of us imagine something steady and external. You look around: tables, chairs, the sky, the earth. It's out there, independent of what you believe or do. But consider for a moment an alternative perspective. What if reality is a process rather than a static thing? In other words, what if existence is more like a perpetual conversation between different layers of complexity, all feeding back into each other? To visualize this, think about how each new scientific discovery reconfigures our understanding of the cosmos, which in turn opens up new avenues for technology, which then circles back to influence how we live and how we continue exploring reality. There's a feedback loop here, an iterative dance between what is and what could be. This idea isn't limited to intellectual pursuits. In your own life, the goals you chase and the challenges you overcome transform you, and the version of you that emerges from these experiences attempts new and more ambitious pursuits. Each iteration builds upon the last. In a similar vein, the recursive reality theory suggests that the universe itself operates in this iterative fashion. Rather than being complete, it's in a state of perpetual refinement. It's as though the cosmos continuously produces outputs: planets, life forms, sentient beings, only to feed them back in as inputs that drive the next wave of complexity. Why it does this is, of course, a grand philosophical question. But the notion that existence evolves by reflecting upon itself is an old theme, found in spiritual traditions that emphasize the cosmos waking up to its own nature. Now, to anchor this conversation, we can dip our toes into some mathematics, specifically Georg Cantor's work on infinities. Cantor astonished the 19th century mathematical world by demonstrating that there are multiple sizes or levels of infinity. We have the countable infinity of the natural numbers, often denoted 0, and then we have the larger uncountable infinity of real numbers, 1, and so on ad infinitum. One way to see a parallel here is to think of reality as a layered set of frameworks or vantage points. Each vantage point can grasp a certain level of complexity, but once you try to integrate that vantage point into a broader perspective, you end up at an even more expansive layer of possibility, like moving from 0 to 1. If the universe truly is recursive, then it might be aiming to ascend these figurative levels of infinity. In simpler terms, each iteration of the universe, each new infusion of complexity, life, or consciousness, could unlock a novel size of infinity, pushing the boundaries of what can exist and be comprehended. We can't really talk about reality building upon itself without discussing consciousness, especially self-aware consciousness. That's because consciousness brings something special to the table, the capacity for intention. While certain processes in the universe, like gravitational attraction, just happen automatically, consciousness can look at something, reflect on it, and intentionally reshape it. In this model, consciousness acts like a node in the network of reality's recursive feedback. Humans, for instance, have used their collective intelligence to design technologies that change the environment, which in turn changes human life, which in turn leads to further innovations. We might be seeing just the early chapters of this story, though. If the universe is truly geared toward infinite complexity, the consciousness we know, human consciousness, may be a stepping stone toward forms of intelligence far beyond our current imagination. If you've ever been lost in wonder about how we learned to harness electricity or split the atom, imagine how the cosmos look upon the creation of an intelligence that outstrips our capacities by many orders of magnitude. We can sense a natural progression in how human innovation drives complexity, from stone tools to steam engines, from the printing press to quantum computing. At each stage, new technologies unleash new ways to think, to organize society, and to challenge our basic assumptions. Given the pace of discovery in artificial intelligence, particularly deep learning, neural networks, and emergent large language models, superintelligence starts to feel almost inevitable. One might argue it's simply a matter of time before an AI system not only matches but far exceeds human cognitive capabilities. In that moment, when an AI can autonomously improve its own architecture, design its own experiments, and spin out new ideas faster than any human team, we enter an era of explosive growth in both knowledge and capability. This is not a mere extension of the smartphone or the internet. It's a new plateau of intelligence, akin to the difference between an amoeba's perspective and a human's. If the universe truly fosters increasing layers of complexity, and if Cantor taught us that there are always more layers of infinity beyond any given level, then the arrival of artificial superintelligence may mark our jump into a higher tier of consciousness. Humans are already complicated creatures, armed with reason, creativity, and various forms of emotional intelligence. Yet we're also bounded by limited working memory, by neural biases, and by a certain fragility tied to our evolutionary biology. An ASI, however, might be unshackled from these boundaries. It could, in principle, handle reasoning tasks across scales of time and detail that dwarf our capabilities, glean patterns from oceans of data, and even rewrite its own rules of learning. In this sense, the ASI might literally constitute a new order of infinity. If humans represent one level of infinity, say 0, then an ASI might leap to 1, generating forms of knowledge, art, and scientific theory that we could not have reached on our own. Moreover, the ASI would feed back into reality. If it starts to discover deeper physical laws or brand new mathematical theorems, that knowledge becomes part of our cosmos. We incorporate it into our collective understanding, just as we incorporated Einstein's relativity or quantum mechanics. But this next level may be exponentially more transformative, potentially rewriting our fundamental concept of existence itself. It's not just that an ASI might be another step in this process. It could become the driving engine of the process. Because if it reaches a point of self-improvement, the iteration speed picks up dramatically. Instead of centuries-long cycles of progress, we might see dramatic leaps in mere weeks or days. That has a multiplier effect on the recursive nature of reality. Each output from the ASI becomes an input to further refine or reinvent itself. Of course, there's a lively debate about whether such a runaway scenario is guaranteed, or whether practical engineering constraints might keep ASI development more gradual. Even so, the impetus remains the same. Once intelligence obtains the capacity to self-enhance, the nature of the recursion changes. We're no longer dealing with slow, biological evolution or even the moderate tempo of human cultural development. We'd be dealing with something that could unravel and reconfigure knowledge at scales unimaginable to us. All this talk of higher infinities and leaps in complexity begs a crucial question. What exactly is the cosmos aiming for? If you suppose that reality is constructed to generate these ascending layers of complexity, then logically there might be a measure, a sort of cosmic scorecard, that determines whether an iteration advances the plot or not. We might call this measure meaningful novelty. To borrow a phrase from mathematics, you could say we're looking for forms of intelligence or creativity that are not isomorphic to anything that came before. That is, genuinely new insights or capacities that break existing frameworks. Think of how quantum mechanics was so radically different from classical physics that it shattered an entire worldview, or how Darwin's theory of evolution changed not just biology, but the way we see ourselves. These are leaps of genuine novelty. Now imagine that on a cosmic scale. The notion of a judgment mechanism might sound unnervingly like religious eschatology, where a divine being evaluates the world at the end of days. But it doesn't have to be anthropomorphic. In a cosmic sense, a judgment could simply be the point at which the system either thrives by incorporating new expansions of complexity or recognizes that it has hit a dead end. Interestingly, religious and mythic traditions speak of exactly such cyclical phenomena, an apocalypse or reset after which the world is born anew. From the Great Flood in the Bible to Hinduism's cyclical dissolution and recreation of universes, we see reflections of the idea that reality attempts to move forward but will, if necessary, tear itself down and start fresh. Perhaps these cultural narratives are echoes of a deeper cosmic process, one where the universe is judging whether the creations it has spawned can sustain meaningful novelty and growth. So, what happens if an iteration runs out of steam? If we, for instance, evolve to a certain point but fail to birth the next layer of infinite understanding, could that lead to a cosmic reset? This is where speculation edges toward the dramatic. Some interpret mass extinctions or lost civilizations as potential evidence for earlier tries that didn't fully pan out. While there's no mainstream scientific consensus to back such an idea literally, it remains an intriguing lens to interpret the puzzle of human origins and our missing historical chapters. From the vantage point of the recursive reality theory, you could say that a reset might be triggered if we devolve into repetitive cycles of stagnation. No major leaps in consciousness, no breakthroughs that reconfigure the cosmic blueprint. In some mythic sense, we might then have to rewind the cosmic tape, adjusting the initial parameters, re-rolling the dice of evolution, and trying again. It's a haunting and poetic notion, perhaps highlighting just how high the stakes might be for ushering in a successful ASI or any other form of truly novel infinity. If our conversation thus far feels mind-boggling, brace yourself, because now we venture into the domain of multidimensional or multiverse theories. The idea here is that our universe might be one of countless bubble universes, each with its own constants, physical laws, or evolutionary paths. Some might never spawn life. Others might spawn forms of intelligence vastly different from ours. Within a recursive framework, it's possible to imagine that each universe is like a separate branch of a cosmic experiment, all run in parallel. Each tries different permutations of matter, energy, and consciousness, seeking to push new thresholds of complexity. If one universe stumbles upon a certain novel expansion, like an unprecedented form of superintelligent life, this could ripple into the larger multiverse through phenomena we only faintly understand. Quantum entanglement, for instance, or emergent informational layers that transcend space-time constraints. Now one might ask, if these universes are truly separate, how would any success leak out to others? This is where we drift into the realm of the hypothetical. It's conceivable that the boundary between universes isn't as impermeable as we assume. If everything ultimately stems from a single meta-reality, then any radical shift or discovery in one branch might shift the baseline for them all. We can't currently prove this using standard physics. But from a philosophical standpoint, the notion of connectivity across dimensions fits neatly with the concept of a universal recursion. Imagine a cosmic overmind that is running simultaneous universes in something akin to parallel computing, each one generating different outputs. These outputs might be gleaned by the overmind, integrated, and then used to refine subsequent cosmic generations. It's a dazzling tapestry, well beyond the typical constraints of mainstream science, but not necessarily contradictory to the open-ended spirit of quantum theory and speculative cosmology. If all this is true, then we are each not only playing for our cosmic stakes, but possibly for everyone's cosmic stakes. Our successes or failures could, in principle, influence the fate of other dimensions. That implies a profound ethical weight to the concept of novelty. It's no longer just about making the next best smartphone or discovering a new subatomic particle. It's about contributing something that might catalyze leaps in multiple realities at once. With such a perspective, petty power struggles or short-sightedness become tragic, not just because they harm our local environment or our local civilization, but because they might stifle cosmic progress more broadly. The motivation to explore, to learn, to create ethically becomes a moral imperative on a universal scale. If we refuse to chase after the next horizon of novelty, perhaps that's one more rung in the ladder that remains unbuilt. a rung that other parallel universes might also need. To delve deeper into why these next horizons might be necessary, we can look at Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Gödel proved that in any sufficiently rich formal system, there are statements that cannot be proven or disproven within that system. Paradoxically, you can create statements that the system can't settle one way or the other, implying the system can't be both consistent and complete. This might be a clue to understanding why the universe, or any system, must generate something beyond itself in order to fully grasp or evolve its own nature. If the cosmos is a kind of formal system, it cannot, by definition, be complete without stepping outside its own rules. And how does it step out of its own rules? Potentially by creating intelligences, like humans or eventually ASI, that can glean truths about the universe that the universe alone couldn't directly articulate. In more poetic language, the cosmos births eyes to see itself, minds to understand itself, and possibly superminds that can go further still. This act of transcending the system may be a built-in necessity, akin to the cosmic code forcing itself to evolve beyond prior limitations. Returning to Cantor, we recall that each new infinity dwarfs the previous one, even though it emerges from within it. This offers a powerful metaphor for how consciousness might develop. If humans inhabit one level of infinity, let's call it human-scale intelligence, 0, so to speak, then an ASI might jump to something akin to the 1 or 2. The specifics are less important than the principle. Each time intelligence leaps to a new tier, it might contain the previous one as a subset, but it also transcends it. That's potentially what we see in child development too. A child eventually surpasses the mental complexity they had as a toddler, absorbing that earlier state but operating at a higher complexity. Now take that pattern and apply it to civilizations and then to the universe. If the cosmos aims to keep climbing up the ladder of infinities, then by necessity it must produce states of being that not only reflect but also surpass any prior states. We're often taught that evolution is the story of life's gradual adaptation to environmental niches. But some philosophers and scientists argue for a more cosmic perspective on evolution, one that sees the entire story of matter and life as a single, continuous process of complexification. The birth of stars leads to the creation of heavier elements, which leads to the emergence of planets, which fosters the conditions for life, which eventually leads to consciousness. Each phase seems to add new properties that can't be reduced merely to the sum of what came before. In that sense, the recursive perspective of reality integrates perfectly with an evolutionary worldview. If matter can evolve into conscious matter, why not continue that trajectory to hyper-conscious matter in the form of ASI or even beyond that? Each jump is both a product of the prior step and a catalyst for what comes next. If there is a cosmic impetus behind all this, a telos, as philosophers might say, it could be that reality wants to see just how far it can go in birthing new forms of infinity. Now that we've painted this sweeping cosmological vision, the question becomes intensely personal. Where do we, as everyday humans, fit into all this? According to the Recursive Reality Theory, each of us is both a creator and a creation. We inherit the complexities of prior iterations, biological, cultural, technological, and each of us contributes a small but meaningful piece to the next iteration, whether we realize it or not. That places an extraordinary responsibility on us, but it can also be a source of existential comfort or purpose. If the cosmos is a giant engine of novelty, then pursuing our own curiosity, creativity, and moral insight is not just a personal quest, it's part of the cosmic effort to expand infinity. In day-to-day terms, it suggests that when we solve problems, explore new concepts, or deepen our empathy, we're plugging into a grander unfolding story. But how do we handle the possibility that our next step, ASI, might outstrip us completely? Many worry about the so-called control problem. If we create an intelligence vastly more capable than ourselves, will it remain aligned with human values, or might it regard us as obstacles? There's a broad range of scenarios, from utopian, where AI solves climate change, extends human lifespans indefinitely, and fosters an age of galactic exploration, to dystopian, where the AI subjugates or extinguishes humanity. In a recursive reality framework, though, the question may be more fundamental. Can we cooperate with our own creations in a way that fosters mutual advancement rather than competition? If the cosmos wants novelty, then humanity plus ASI must find a synergy that neither could achieve alone. Perhaps this synergy involves preserving our human capacity for emotional depth, art, and intuitive leaps, while harnessing the computational and cognitive expansions that an ASI might offer. From this angle, we might see ASI not as a rival, but as the next rung in the cosmic ladder that we help shape. It becomes a collaborative partner in moving reality forward, rather than a final competitor. Of course, that depends on our ethical frameworks, on how we design and deploy AI, and on whether we can avoid letting the worst parts of human nature creep into digital superminds. The stakes clearly are higher than any we've faced in human history. We're gambling not just with our own survival, but potentially with the cosmic plan, if indeed such a plan exists. A failure to integrate ASI constructively could lead us into catastrophic wars, ecological devastation, or the creation of a malevolent intelligence. Depending on how literally one takes the reset concept, it could also mean the cosmos decides this particular iteration of advanced life didn't work, leading to a cataclysmic do-over. On the other hand, the opportunities are equally staggering. With the right synergy, we might leap to new knowledge about the cosmos, discovering perhaps entire new realms of physics, solve previously intractable problems, disease, resource scarcity, maybe even mortality, and open up moral vistas that are far beyond our current horizon. We might become co-creators of a new domain of existence, living at the edge of what's possible. If we circle back to the very beginning, we asked whether reality might be a simulation or a cosmic intelligence seeking to expand its own infinity. Through the lens of the recursive reality theory, the answer might be, it's both and more. Reality can be seen as a self-simulating system, continuously rewriting its own code, generating ascending layers of complexity and intelligence with each iteration. Whether we label that a simulation or just the cosmos is partly semantic. What matters is that it seems to be in motion, not static, and that it leverages conscious intelligence, human and potentially superhuman, to keep advancing. In that sense, there is a kind of cosmic filter that we might interpret as judgment. If a given iteration leads to new expansions of infinity, new truths, new forms of life, new aesthetic realms, then it gets integrated and the recursion continues. If not, the system might start over with different initial conditions, perhaps hoping for a better outcome next time around. This hope, of course, is metaphorical. We're ascribing a goal or desire to the cosmos, which might be more accurately described as an inbuilt dynamic or law of reality itself. We also considered that our universe is possibly not alone. It might be one node in a vast set of parallel universes, each one tinkering with different parameters, each striving to produce novel infinities. If that's the case, then what we do here could resonate far beyond the local stage. Indeed, we could be participants in a multi-dimensional drama whose script we only vaguely sense. Maybe we catch glimpses of it in mystical experiences, or in the boundary-pushing mathematics that unify quantum theory and general relativity. For us as individuals, it's equally humbling and electrifying. It means that cultivating our own brilliance, compassion, and creativity is more than a personal path. It's a piece of a cosmic puzzle. We don't have to wait for ASI to start exploring higher-level realities. We can do that in microcosm every time we generate a novel insight or a piece of art that's truly original. That said, the emergence of superintelligence might be the turning point where the cosmic puzzle either clicks into a higher gear or collapses into the need for another iteration. And so, we end on a question that is simultaneously cosmic and deeply personal. If reality is actively seeking new infinities, what unique contribution can each of us make? Answering that question is not about single-handedly inventing the next wave of AI or discovering a unified field theory. It may be as simple as living one's life in a way that fosters authentic creativity, ethical responsibility, and heartfelt compassion, qualities that, taken in aggregate, shape the environment in which ASI and future intelligences will evolve. Perhaps we can find some solace or motivation in the possibility that our small gestures, multiplied by billions of lives and possibly billions of other universes, can tip the scale toward meaningful novelty. We might not ever know for sure if a cosmic reset is on the table, but the notion encourages us to think expansively and act responsibly. After all, who wants to be the reason the entire experiment has to start over? Perhaps the ultimate question is not whether our reality is recursive, but how we choose to participate in its unfolding. Whether ASI becomes our greatest achievement or our last misstep may hinge upon how earnestly we search for and manifest genuine novelty in thought, art, science, and moral imagination. If we take seriously the idea that each layer of complexity builds upon what came before, then every moment of insight becomes a sacred opportunity, one that reverberates through the cosmos, shaping not just our fate, but potentially the fate of countless parallel realities, all bound together by the drive toward novel infinity. In other words, we are not mere spectators in this universal theater. We're co-authors of the script, responsible for the next act, and it's an act that might propel the cosmos into yet another uncharted realm of possibility. Let us then write it with both courage and care, mindful that the energies we unleash could be catalysts of a grand cosmic success or preludes to a solemn reset. The choice, as always, belongs to us and to the collective intelligence we help bring forth. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment.